sorry. We're killing time because we're sort of waiting for Andrew, who is on his way. So talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. Just kidding. Happy New Year. Welcome to the first RDA meeting of the year. I mean, you too. Hi. Welcome. Welcome to the RDA meeting, board members. We are going to have an amazing year this year. We're putting that intention out there into the world and the universe so that we have an amazing RDA year where we get to build communities throughout our city. That's our goal this year. So, welcome. And we, of course, because I never like to do things the way I'm told to do them, are going to switch up the agenda quite a bit. I will, however, start with approval of the minutes. Actually, I'll start with general comments to the board, but I don't have any, unless somebody wants to say, yes, we do have one. Come on up, Boo. Nigel, Happy New Year, welcome.
Happy New Year, thank you. So I don't know where it's going to take place on the agenda, but I'm here to speak about the North Temple Catalytic Project. My name is Nigel Swaby. I'm the chair of the River District Chamber, and a lot has happened since that was first presented to you, but as a board and an organization, we continue to support the idea of a public market at the Fair Park as the #1 priority. Second, of course, is our long-standing project of the Folsom Corridor, and there were some items on there that would support that. And then third would be lighting and safety improvements along North Temple, particularly around the gateway in on 8th West and North Temple. So that's where we stand as an organization, and we're eager to see what you guys decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. And just so you know, I am kind of, as I said, switching up the agenda. So we're going to hear our project area creation priorities, then do vice chair, and then the North Temple. So it'll be a little bit. But just so you know, so you can stick around and hear about that. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the board? You can say anything you want, even if it's not nice, but okay, great. Then we'll move on to approval of the minutes. I'm looking to approve the minutes of Tuesday, December 3rd, 2019, and Tuesday, December 10th, 2019.
Madam, second.
I have a motion by Board Member Rogers and a second by Board Member Wharton. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. The minutes have been approved. And so, because we want to make sure that Andrew is here for a vice chair election and for the North Temple Catalytic Project, is a lot of his district, we are going to move on to item number 4, which is our project area creation priorities. So Ben Ludke, Danny Waltz, and Court Utley. I always say Utley, it's Spanish. Welcome to the new year, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how you want to kick it off. If you guys want to start, Ben, do you have any sort of intro you want to go with, or shall we just turn it over to staff? It's up to you.
We can turn it over to the RDA staff.
Okay. Then I guess I'm looking at you two.
Thank you, Madam Chair. About once a year, we like to have a discussion with the board about the potential for new project areas in the city, and to really step back from our day-to-day work and have a discussion about what areas of the city we think could benefit from, or most benefit from, the tools that the RDA brings through the creation of project areas. The last 2 years when we've had this discussion, the top priorities have been the State Street project area and the 9-line project area. And as you know, just by way of reminder, we're still in the project area creation process with both of those. The board has adopted the project area plans. It's my understanding that the Salt Lake City School District is also generally in favor of them. And we're still negotiating with Salt Lake County regarding those. We do have 5 active project areas: the Central Business District, Depot, North Temple, Granary, and the Northwest Quadrant. I suppose we could add Block 67 to that list now. It's my understanding that that's been formally, that the interlocal agreements have been executed. So, and I think any discussion of new project areas, we probably ought to highlight just really what that entails. It's a often years-long process by which we requires a number of steps from this body as well as the City Council to identify a boundary and within the city and study that area and prepare a public benefit analysis, look at the amount of tax increment that could be generated over time, hold public hearings, notify property owners. There's a protest period, project plans have to be adopted, and interlocal agreements have to be negotiated and executed with taxing entity partners. And because of that latter point, I think we should point out that some political capital is expended when we do that. We can't return to that well too many times and create project areas indiscriminately. We sort of have to be strategic about how we do it and where we do it, and how frequently. We frequently hear from developers about creating new project areas, and that's due to the incentives that project area brings. And we've discussed those as staff, and for your consideration, have in your packet about 8 potential new project areas that we can review with you. We've discussed those with the Redevelopment Advisory Committee, and I think it's fair to say that there wasn't really a consensus winner among those 8. There were certainly some folks who supported the Brickyard project area. And then there was some discussion about the new potential project areas at the university as well, at the research park. Anything you want to add to that, Danny, from that meeting?
No, that was perfect.
So before we jump into those 8, I think I would like us to, if possible, consider these new project areas in the context of the guiding framework that the board approved in November. New mission statement, new values, new metrics by which we would evaluate our projects and processes. And if you remember the 3 kind of values, and they're up on the screen there, if you would scroll down just a touch, thank you. Economic growth, community impact, and neighborhood vibrancy. So I would propose that any new project area we would consider would really touch all 3 of those things and kind of be a healthy overlap among them. That we would want to, of course, have an economic impact, but we would want to create a project area that would prioritize the improvement of quality of life and equity for both residents and businesses in the city, and that we would want to cultivate distinct and livable neighborhoods that are contextually sensitive, resilient, connected, and sustainable. So with that, there are these 8 potential project areas, and Madam Chair, I'm happy to provide a real quick high-level overview of those 8, or we could just jump straight to questions.
Hold, please. I'm thinking about this because, and the reason I'm thinking about it is because I asked Ben to pull up we had this discussion early last year as well.
That's right.
And a lot of the same project areas were discussed. So maybe you can jump in, Court, and kind of give us a quick briefing on that. And then if people have questions about what we talked about last year in relation to these, Ben, you can maybe provide some of that historical context if need be. Does that work for everyone?
Yeah, so you want me to sort of hit just a high level of what these 8 project areas are then? Okay. Great. So Research Park, these first two really would be partnerships with the University of Utah. And the Research Park would be really a reimagining of the existing Research Park to think of it more as a mixed-use environment with greater density. There's currently, as you know, a lot of surface parking and a lot of lawn at Research Park, and so this would be a complete reimagining of that. And it's my understanding that the university is in the process of looking at a master plan for the Research Park that should be done this spring. It would look at business growth. As you know, there's some new businesses that are spun off of that Research Park, and so how can we keep those there? And they're going to need office space to do that. We would look at transit opportunities as well as workforce housing.
So I'm going to look to my board members. I don't know if you guys want to get the high level on all 8 and then go back to questions, or if you want to jump in with questions now, that's up to you. I do want to point out that Jonathan Bates from the University of Utah, he's the executive director of the Department of Real Estate Administration for Research Park. That is a very long title, but I think I got it all. Is here in the audience if we have any questions for him. So I don't know if you want to jump into each project right now with any questions that you might have, or it is? Research Park? Oh, it is. We'll wait for you then.
Okay, Stadium Village, also a potential partnership with the university to look at the redevelopment potential of the area of the large parking lot just west of the stadium, as well as the surrounding neighborhood. Again, this could be looked at in terms of a mixed-use development. There is a light rail station there, so transit-oriented development could be successful there. We would look at commercial services as well as structured parking. Item number 3 is the Granary District. Granary District was created in 1999 for the purposes primarily for redeveloping the fleet block. And as you know, that's not done yet. And so we've had some conversations about potentially extending that project area's life. It sunsets in 2023, and potentially expanding it for 2 blocks to the northeast to incorporate some areas that where new development is planned and could benefit the project area. The baseball stadium, one of our limited use project areas currently. The idea here would be to amend the existing project area or incorporate it into the State Street project area that's under development right now in order to utilize a portion of the tax increment to deal with some deferred maintenance to the stadium and also some improvements to the stadium. And then, of course, to redevelop the city-owned parking lot immediately north of the stadium. Item 5 is the Grand Boulevards. This would really be kind of thinking about the front door to the city and what kind of entry experience do people have when they're entering our capital city. So it would be a beautification project for primarily the 500 South and 600 South corridors. It would be a partnership with the Utah Department of Transportation, and we would also look at fostering development on parcels that are adjacent to those 2 corridors. 400 South and 400 West, item number 6, would be, this would be a transit-focused project area. It would look at extending the downtown rail network. A part of the current city's light rail master plan or transit master plan is a spur that would come off of the track station at 900 South and Central 9th, would go west down 900 South and then go north right up 400 West, so that we right through the heart of the Granary District and eventually terminate into the intermodal hub. The idea there is to create some redundancy in the transit network downtown and provide a more direct route to the intermodal hub, as opposed to, if you think about the current path, kind of wanders through the downtown. Of course, any time we look at projects that involve transit, there is the potential for redevelopment, and transit does have a tendency to catalyze redevelopment in the neighborhoods they're located in. Item number 7, also a transit-focused project area. This would be an expansion of the S-Line, which, at least in the city's transit master plan, would go north along 1100 East to 1700 South. There's also the potential for this particular project to become a larger, more multi-jurisdictional project with Mill Creek, South Salt Lake, Holiday, and the Utah Transit Authority to look at extending the S-Line south past Brickyard to the former Cottonwood Mall site and the Holiday Village. And then lastly is Brickyard. As you know, Brickyard's a primarily auto-centric development. It is a neighborhood within the city that I think has a lot of development potential. And so this project area would look at adding housing to that neighborhood, as well as considering some pedestrian-oriented infrastructure improvements. So with that, I guess we would look for some discussion about if there are project areas here that you like better than others, or if there are areas within the city that we haven't considered that we should be.
Board members, questions? Anna?
I have a question more about capacity, like the agency's capacity in terms of adding additional projects when we have projects right now that, for example, the Greenwich District has been there since 1999 and it's about to sunset, and we were hoping that finally the momentum has come and it's going to sunset. So but I guess what I'm trying to say is, how do you think you can handle more projects, or is it a good way to use staff time, or should we, as a group, focus on the ones that we have and expand the ones that we're kind of working on and have gained momentum? I'm not sure. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. So thank you for asking that, because that's one of our most important concerns as we look at our workload and taking on projects, as well as Court indicated, taking on project area creation, which is extremely task burdensome. So if you remember, as part of our current year budget, last year during the budget process, we did get approval from the board for 3 new positions. So that was 2 project managers and a data person. Through the course of just losing previous staff, we have not even gotten to the point where we're tapping into hiring those positions yet. We have brought on 2 new staff members over the past 3 months. And so we have found that bringing on staff is not something you can do in large numbers. You need to bring them on slowly and train them, because then otherwise you're spending more time just training than you are actually doing projects. And so we anticipate a steady path of filling those positions. And I think as we do that and fill that will increase our capacity for projects, as well as looking at project area creation. Now, if the board were to say we wanted all 8 project areas, then I'd probably be back here saying that we need to get more staff. But I think right now, where 9 Line and State Street haven't fully come on board yet in terms of a staff workload, as well as looking at new project areas, we're fine now. And if we can tie our ramping up of staff to when we bring on project areas, we should be fine.
So what's a good balance? What do you think with the new positions and with the staff time that you kind of have available? How many projects do you think it's reasonable for the agency to take on out of 8? Like, is it 2 more? Is it 5 more? Is it all?
How's your workload, Court? I mean, I think ideally, if you were to ask me right now what I think a sweet spot would probably be looking to target replacing Granary and Depot coming offline in the next 3 to 4 years. And obviously, as those come off, we'd be creating project areas and ramping them up to replace those. So I think if you were to ask, I'd say 2 would be good, 3 is probably possible. If you get to where you're looking at 4 or more, then I think we'd start having problems. But every project area is different in terms of its workload and what the demands are. CBD is much different than West Temple Gateway ever was, as far as the scope and the number of projects. But so.
Other board members?
Just a specific question on the research.
Turn your...
More specific on just the research park, we talk about having traffic up there, it's atrocious, and we make that more dense, and where people are going to go and how they're going to get there, because it's already a problem, and adding that to that area would be a mistake.
That is a fantastic question, and that is probably priority number 1 for the University of Utah. And if we'd like to get into further discussion of that with Jonathan during that item, I would recommend that. But I will say just high level briefly to give you an answer right now, That is probably the focus of their master plan that they're working on right now. They have those elements within it. And not to speak for the University of Utah or Jonathan, but they are looking at increasing the density of Research Park while at the same time improving the transit that serves that, as well as the transportation needs, accessing it both within the park itself and the connectors to it. And ideally, they'd like to say that as they increase density, they would like to provide more opportunity and better transit options and connectivity that would hopefully offset that impact on the surrounding neighborhood. As well as they're looking at incorporating a significant amount of housing within the project, and that housing would range from the workforce to students to people that are the professional positions up at the university. And the idea there is to create a community that truly is live, work, and play, so that you are minimizing the commuting into Research Park and providing more options for people to live right there on campus within that village. And so that's something they're very tuned to. They recognize that that would be a challenge to increasing their density within the city moving forward. So
Yeah, because I'd rather see the traffic come down before saying we're going to be hopeful that I'm going to win the World Series here. And I'd like to see it come down before I add any more traffic.
and that is one of the reasons that they have approached us, and that we are excited to be a partner in that if it's approved, because I think that would be one of our primary points of focus, is to help them alleviate that problem.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
I just have a follow-up, I guess, on university projects, and that's looking at the taxing entities. We know that a lot of the property up at the University of Utah is property tax exempt,
Mhm.
right? So how does this work? Are we just picking and choosing up there what is and what isn't going to be property tax exempt, and how are we going to invest that money?
Right. It's a good question. That shows that you're tuned to our tax increment basis. So in those preliminary conversations with the university, we asked them that in terms of if a property is owned by the university and occupied by them, arguably it's tax exempt. And they recognize that. I think right now their numbers are about 40% of their property is tax exempt by way of them owning and occupying it, and they are actually transitioning to be more of a public-private partnership model, where they are the landowner, but then they are doing either a ground lease or a building lease to for-profit companies, which then kicks in the fact that those buildings would be taxable. And so recognizing that that will be part of the equation, what we have indicated is obviously the level of support and participation we can have in Research Park is clearly dependent on how much of their property is taxable, what it throws off in tax increment, and then how we can apply that to the project area itself. So we'd be looking at a more blanket area, project area, so that you could still spend it on the big ticket items of transit and trails and open space, but it would be driven by the amount of actual taxable value that they.
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
I'd just like to voice support for the gateway projects to the city. I think that this is something that the city's talked about doing for a long, long time, ever since we shortened the runways or the off ramps and on ramps to the freeway. And I think that there's so much opportunity there that if I'm looking at these, that's the one that I'm the most excited about, because I think it's so overdue, and there's the opportunity potential there is huge. So
I guess mine's a follow-up to that, and that's, there's one big obstacle with those gateways, and those are the billboards. And we're still waiting to hear back on what is the plan to clean that up. What are the power lines? How are we going to do that? We need to have that follow-up discussion, in my opinion, before we go diving in and deciding what we're going to do. Because if there's no way forward, why move forward? My other question is, too, we've got a 10% affordable housing coming our way with a tax increment in the Northwest Quadrant. We still need to have that discussion. And for me, I don't want to make any decisions until we have that discussion, so we can actually look and say, look, this is what it's going to throw off in the next 10 years. Let's figure out where we're going to spend that money. So, I mean, I say the Brickyard and the S-Line extension would be amazing, but until we have that discussion, I don't want to come out and say anything more.
I would agree about the S-Line extension. Well, I agree about both, but I think if there's a way to use RDA and creating them as a tool to help maybe facilitate a compromise with the billboards that they're also invested in, I think that I would love to see that be part of the part of the solution, even though it's previously been a barrier. But I know that they've been talking with some of the other developers in that area, and those developers seemed kind of optimistic that they could come to an agreement. So I hope we can do that. And I don't want to put the cart before the horse either, but so I would love to have more information about what would need to happen for us to move forward on the ground boulevards.
And I think a lot of the compromises that are being set forth or discussed are things that we would have to fix in our sign ordinance. So that's a long discussion that's going to be coming our way.
Question on the number 6, the 400 South and 400 West. So we talk about extending that, but how does this tie into, or is there any tie into transportation out to the airport? And how's that going to work? Because we have a lot of people going out to the airport, but it's almost impossible to use the right rail to go to the airport if you want to get there on the same day. And is this tie into the idea or a plan to get the rail out to the airport in a reasonable time?
It does, yeah. If you were if you were northbound on tracks, this would provide a more direct route to get to the airport.
Without changing?
You'd have to change trains, but yeah, you would. It would be more direct than going through the current path through the downtown that currently exists.
So this should be able to handle the 65,000 people that go out there every day or anything else like that, increase that?
I can't speak to the capacity, but I do know that it's certainly helpful in the overall system to add the redundancy when you're dealing with the capacity.
Okay.
I think to that point, before we leave that, I think that would absolutely be something that we would study as part of the feasibility of the project area. As Court said, we understand it's on their plan for a long-term plan. We can't speak to what the capacity is, but clearly I think that would be something that we would return and say, this is what that project area would look like, this is potentially what the benefits would be, and how it may or may not address that capacity versus other priorities.
Yeah, we got to bring the two together, because the airport traffic, or the transit out to the airport, is really doable.
Yeah.
Especially if you're on the east side.
I have another, so I agree with James and Chris with the Grand Boulevard, so I'm sorry, and I'm in agreement with you guys. But moving on to also the Granary District, I think sometimes in my mind, I think about these project areas and I'm thinking, okay, this is what we were set to do, this is what we have accomplished, and this is a momentum that we have or not. Can we extend that, or is it something we could leverage so that we can see even more than what we were hoping for, or more than what we were hoping for? So this is a way that I'm not sure if you guys are looking at it that way, saying this is an opportunity. I mean, there's a lot of positive things happening at the Granary. Would it be worth our time investing in that one for a few more years than instead of moving on to another project area that it's unknown if it's going to generate anything or not? So that's how I would be prioritizing if I had to choose. I would be looking at the ones that are working and maybe extending those or focusing on those more. Thank you.
Just for board members' reference, it just came in. Ben sent around his notes from the previous year's discussion, so it's in your email.
So this may come as a shock to you, but I have a few things to add to the discussion. First off, just for board members' sake, and some context to the S-line extension, this was something that I asked the RDA staff to put on the list as a priority for me. And this stems, and there's a couple of things to keep in mind, and if I get this wrong, like Ben and or Danny or Court or Ben can fix what I'm saying, but so in part this comes from, if you'll remember last year, our transportation division, is Jen in here because Jen McGrath worked really hard on these grants, received a grant from the county to study the extension of the S-line, where it would viably and most efficiently go, mostly looking south. It was a grant that we did in conjunction with Mill Creek and Holiday. So it was a multi-jurisdictional grant that provided us almost $1 million to look at the extension of the S-line. The TRZs, this has not been used, as to my knowledge, right? It has not yet been used, and the statute was passed 2 years ago now, and actually would run sort of through the city council. It's not really an RDA thing, it's more of a council thing, but it seems best to be at the RDA level because it's more like a creation area, and is sort of another tool that's a little bit broader in some ways. Because of the idea that this study, hopefully, and I don't see John Larson, but I talked to him late last year, that hopefully by the middle of spring, end of beginning of summer, we're gonna have some information back about that grant and what those results sort of look like, or maybe at the end. I know we're in the process of hiring a consultant, and there's no one from transportation, but they weren't expecting for me to go on and on about this. So we will have some results from this study, and the idea of putting a TRZ on our radar in this area is that why get a grant for $1 million if we're not going to then figure out some ways to have a funding streamline or have some sort of funding options to actually implement the study that we just spent $1 million on, right? And it would be in conjunction, and I think that it's a conversation we can start having with Mill Creek and Holiday, and sort of be able to create some connections there so that we are bettering our public transportation as a whole, right? So that was, I had asked that we put this on this list because there's a lot of other things at play with why that may become a priority kind of maybe sooner rather than later, even though it may not seem like it's such a priority now. There may be some things that come out of this study that say, oh, we might have the opportunity to really hop on this and make it a priority. And as far as Brickyard, this was on the list because of Mill Creek last year and was a very, very high priority when we were dealing with the potential annexation of Brickyard. The property owners, I don't think there's a real rush from Claude right now, and so it's on the list, I think, to stay on our radar, that is there somewhere, but it's not like something that I think anybody, including the property owner, is ready to jump on right at this moment, but it's there, that it is a part of our city that I kind of think we have an opportunity to really look at, and it could be a great place for some affordable housing, especially as we maybe look at what our high opportunity zones may look like, and if we change some of those high opportunity zones, I think that actually, I don't know if it falls within our designated high opportunity zone, but again, if we're looking at what this study may look like as we extend the S-line south, there may be a real opportunity to kind of do some development in conjunction with development of an extension of the S-line south. So those are just kind of there for your radar, and that they may come up quicker. I mean, we sort of had to jump on Brickyard last year, and they put a wonderful plan together in a matter of minutes, it seemed like. So those are just there for those reasons. A couple of questions I have for you guys. So when we talk about the Grand Boulevards, I feel like I may have a different idea of what that project area looks like than other people in the community, and maybe people who are involved in our legislature, and so I'm wondering how we define Grand Boulevards, because I've had a lot of property owners or lobbyists come and say, we need to fix the Grand Boulevards and do all these things, but I guess my question is, what really is the responsibility of the RDA? And as we're looking at these project areas, what are you as RDA staff envisioning? And is that the same thing that other people are envisioning? Because it seems like I feel a little bit of the conversation has a disconnect.
Yeah. You want to share your vision first?
Well, I think we would have to. We didn't share a potential boundary with you today for a reason, and it's because we wanted to have a discussion more conceptually about a neighborhood or an area within the city, instead of getting caught up in should the line be on Fifth South or this East or whatever. So I think that, I know the Downtown Alliance has done a bunch of work looking at the Grand Boulevards. I know there's some property owners along that corridor, some major property owners and lobbyists involved. There's been conversations with members of the legislature about it and state participation. So that's a long way of saying I think we would need to study that, and we would need to reach out, and we would need to identify an appropriate boundary and then return to the board and have a discussion about that.
Almost like, what can they expect from us? Like, what can we offer? Like, right? Like, what the expectation is. Like, just adding to that one, what is it that we can do? Like, what are our tools and what can we do? And then what's the other roles?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it touches back to Councilmember Rogers' comment about really what would we be trying to accomplish there. Because arguably the first two things that come to mind are either the bearing of the power lines and or removing, reducing, doing something with the billboards that make it more visually appealing. And I think those are all the high-level things that seek to improve the aesthetics of the Grand Boulevards. And at the surface, we probably wouldn't need to play a role in that outside of maybe if we wanted to prioritize sharing in some of those costs for that impact. I think beyond that is what Court is touching on, is that as we've been having conversations with the actual property owners who are proposing developments, they're now looking at not just those high-level aesthetics and improvements, but they're looking at how that impacts what they can build on their property with regard to either the billboards in place that are on properties that can't be redeveloped because they're burdened by a billboard lease, or what the density is of their projects that they can build right up against the power line. And so that certainly impacts some of the redevelopment opportunities for the property along those Grand Boulevards. And so I think when that discussion starts getting into actually the built environment of projects, that's where we may be able to come in and play a role, both within helping to facilitate that, helping to offset that cost, and then taking it to a level that we feel would then be in alignment with our framework, which is how can then we instill public benefits? How can we work on that pedestrian level of improvements or connectivity of, you know, arguably these are two massive one-way streets that for all intents and purposes serve as a boundary within our city. And so is there a role we could play in terms of that street level activation and improvements of the projects and how to make it a little bit better of an area? But again, that's entirely dependent on what we feel our role could be if we're needed and to what extent we draw those boundaries.
Can I just point out that this came up in our earlier discussion? I'm looking at Ben's notes from last year's discussion, and I bring this up because James mentioned it last year, and I think it needs to be brought up again, that this might be the perfect area and probably the perfect time as we look at the area to talk to property owners about SAAs for maintenance on these things. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, and in response, so the legislation was changed last year that provided that the level of voltage that is going through those power lines right now does qualify as part of state legislative intent to be covered under an SAA. So we were successful in hitting the goal in that way. And those are the conversations we've had with a lot of the property owners too, where some of the property owners are coming to us saying we're actually interested in utilizing that as a tool, that they actively engaged in that.
And I'll just add the piece that always seems to be the barrier is when the numbers are crunched, and it's very expensive to bury power lines that, you know, of that high voltage. And so even though it's great that the state now allows us to, that was previously not something that we could even offer as a tool to bury power lines. But there will be sticker shock from whoever gets the bill. So anyway.
Excellent. But I think now, as we're just entering the year and looking at these project creation areas, and as we discussed a bunch last year when we were going through our 9 Central streetscape, now's the time to get the involvement of property owners who clearly want something to be done there, and I think really would be partners with the RDA, but now's the time to get them involved in the discussions of an SAA, right? And get their participation in it as much as they want our participation in it, right? And have that conversation so when that sticker does come, everybody at least knows that this is what they wanted as well, right? And we're not footing the bill.
Agreed.
I just want to add one of the city's major planning efforts, the RUDOT study of 1988, which was really focused on the downtown and where it should go over the next half century, is the oldest adopted document I know of that talks about the Grand Boulevard. So it does go back at least 30 plus years as an idea, to Councilmember Wharton's point earlier. And it wasn't focused so much on the power lines, it was focused on making it welcoming, showing civic pride, and doing so through art, doing so through pedestrians, amenities, and landscaping. So it was very much about that visual impact when you enter the downtown. It didn't have specific recommendations about working with adjacent property owners. Of course, we'd want to do that.
Right.
But the vision has been color and art and showing pride.
Perfect. We have to get wrapping up, but so does anybody have, I have one more thing to add, but does anybody have anything? Yeah, Dan.
Back to the S line. So the reason we stop at 17 South on that one and going further south, am I going to?
That's just in the master plan and probably not something that we want to, I mean, that's the north route, right? That is in the master plan.
Yeah, going
at
up
this
11th
point.
East to 17 South.
And I don't know why it stopped. You?
On context that maybe we can set up an orientation meeting, because it's a long legislative history that involves more city council side than RDA side, but we can set up a meeting to kind of update you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
The,
Question?
yeah.
Do we have a timeline to make a decision in this? Like, would you like for us to make a decision today, at least a straw poll, or later in the year? I mean, what's the timeline for you guys to move on with this?
We don't have any target timeline. I think, as Court said, we've just kind of gotten in the habit of bringing this once a year so that we can have the conversation, and if there's something we want to start pulling the trigger on. We do have on the agenda today setting the survey boundaries potentially for the Research Park and University Village. No timeline tied to any of those, other than just, is there interest for us to start looking at other possibilities or future project areas? Even if you were to give direction today, that doesn't imply any commitment as much as just starting to look at feasibility or some of the things we might want to prioritize.
One thing I would like to ask, and maybe we can do this offline, have we looked at whether, and we've talked about it a little bit, but which potential, like the pros and cons of the baseball stadium, either just putting it in the State Street area or amending an like, maybe we can talk about this offline. I'm curious of what's the best route with the baseball stadium. Mostly, I think, so that if somebody's already working on a project area there and we just sort of incorporate it, is that going to help or hinder or staff time and priorities and stuff like that? So maybe we can get some information on that for a future date. And I did have one other thing. Why exactly is the county holding up the 9 line?
The county, as of last Tuesday, adopted an updated version of their policy by which they would consider partnering as part of project areas and interlocal agreements. And so we had submitted our request for those 2 project areas right at the time that they were transmitting that to the council. And they asked us to hold off on that until the final approval. And now we will resubmit those requests based on the updated version of that policy and start to move forward. They have about 9 project area requests right now, I think, in the queue that they put on hold for their updated policy.
What does their updated policy include?
It primarily includes direction with regard to what their participation level would be. If you remember, in our project area plans, we had proposed a 75-25 split, which both the city council and the school district approved. That's what we had proposed to the county. They have taken out of their policy a target percentage and essentially just set it up to where it's more project specific. And then they have put in there some structured milestones by which we would submit as part of our request our feasibility and financial analysis based on different levels of participation that they can review.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, we will move on. Thanks, Court. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are going to move on to item number 5, which is the survey area boundaries and initiation of community reinvestment for University of Utah Research Park and Utah Stadium Village. And as I mentioned, we do have Joshua Bates in the audience, and we may call you up and ask some questions. We are going to try, we have about 25-ish minutes for this, so FYI, board members. Jonathan, did I say Joshua? Sorry, Jonathan.
Should I just jump in?
Oh, hi.
I was gonna say, I think we teed it up pretty good in our last item, so.
Yeah, we did.
I think a lot of that was covered. Good. Happy New Year, everybody. As it was mentioned, I'm here to discuss the University of Utah survey boundaries for University of Utah Research Park and the U of U Stadium Village. So just to give you kind of a high-level overview, the approval of the boundary resolution is just the very first step that would establish survey areas, which would authorize the RDA to kind of further explore the feasibility of establishing a potential project area. The next steps in this process would be engaging with the University of Utah would adopt their master plan, and the RDA would coordinate with the stakeholders. So we would talk with property owners, taxing entities, and the city departments. From there, we would then create a draft plan that includes the public benefit analysis, project area goals and objectives, and we would create a budget. And just to quickly go over the project areas, I think Court kind of mentioned a lot of this information, but the first proposed survey area would be for Research Park. I think many people know Research Park houses many of the universities, or many businesses and companies that have come from the result of U of U research. The area has very low vacancy rates, and many businesses start out here and many expand from this location. The layout and footprint of Research Park is more suburban in nature, with its sprawling office buildings in between the sea of surface parking lots. In addition, the area is not really conducive to walking and transit, and the park lacks connection to the main campus. So the purpose of exploring the Research Park as a project area includes kind of creating a mixed-use development that incorporates housing, retail, and services to the existing office development and surface parking. It would consider the efficient use of existing surface parking and the potential for structured parking. It would accommodate various transportation options. So right now, a lot of it's very car-centric. So we would explore other options of for people to get around walking, biking, and using transit. We'd also look at connecting to the main campus and plan for future transit opportunities, and in addition, provide housing opportunities for people who work for the university and within Research Park. The second proposed survey area would be the Stadium Village. This would create, so the U has explored redevelopment of the parking lot for many, many years. And this project would kind of create an active node with amenities for the West Campus area, and it benefits from the proximity to the university, the stadium, light rail, and neighborhood, nearby neighborhoods and commercial. It would also consider the redevelopment opportunities on the stadium parking lot, and it would establish a destination between downtown and the university. From there, I can take any questions, and as we've mentioned, Jonathan from the U is here.
Board members? Or Jen?
Can I do a quick thing of just the process, because especially for a new board member, this is the first kind of detailed briefing that the board will have had on this topic, and so creating a boundary area doesn't commit the city to doing the project area. It doesn't commit staff time necessarily, but it does take a little staff time to do kind of an initial survey. So just keeping that in mind, that it's, pretty casual.
And this boundary area can change, right?
Yes, you can change the boundary area. Arguably, at this point in the process, you would typically want to make the boundary area larger than what you may or may not actually settle in on. And I'd say that's probably more of a factor for the University Village area than Research Park. I mean, that has some pretty natural boundaries that I think we would respect. But that can change as we start to look at the feasibility and hone in onto what our actual role and feel that we would want to participate in and provide.
Other questions?
Just curious, how'd you determine the boundary? Because the one, you have a baseball diamond, the tennis courts there in Sunnyside. is that part of the university, Sunnyside Park, the bottom left-hand corner, southwest corner?
The bottom left-hand corner, that picks up their, I can't remember the name of the development there, it's their student housing. And then the,
Jonathan, will you do me a favor? Come on up to the table.
That's not part of Sunnyside Park.
No.
Gotcha, yeah.
And then if you can just state your name and repeat that, because we record everything, so that our audiences at home can listen.
So my name's Jonathan Bates. I'm the Executive Director of Real Estate Administration and Research Park for the university. I'm also a resident of District 6 within Salt Lake City.
And just the same thing about where Capecchi goes into, crosses Foothill with the VA hospital, and then there's that, just a little bit up to the north, just south of the X in the map. It kind of goes right through, it looks like a building, office area in the restaurant. Nope, a little up to the left. To the right, right there. Sorry. It's a line dance, exactly. It just seems like it goes right through where there's a bakery shop and the intersection. I'm like, how'd you guys
is that
determine the line?
university owned, that northern piece?
So
right there?
that parking lot and office building is on VA property, ground leased to a local developer that's built that office
Okay.
building.
Just, thanks. Just curious. Those lines cut there.
And we try to follow parcel lines as much as we can to keep it a little more simple. And this is a little bit bigger than what the research park area is. Just for the purposes of the survey area, we usually like to start a little bigger and then we kind of narrow from there.
So I do have a couple of questions. How, you mentioned earlier, Court mentioned earlier when we were kind of going through our last agenda item, that this would be a partnership with the university. How would that partnership be structured, I guess, besides just the land, right? Like, what does that look like?
Well, and that's, giving a little background on that, I'd like to say we've been working with Jonathan now for probably almost 2 years, at least since I've come on. And the University of Utah recognized the need to do a master plan for this area. And so as we got involved in those conversations early on, we started identifying exactly what that partnership could be. And for us initially, it would be, as we create our CRA plan, that essentially would create the project area, their university research park plan would be kind of what we would use as the starting point for that. And so we would want to make sure, first and foremost, that as they look at doing things within their plan, we can start finding ways that would align with us setting up a project area and utilizing tax increment to help realize what we would want to see as the benefits coming out of that plan. And so our office, Tracy, has been sitting in on that process for the master plan and tracking that. And then ultimately our next step would be, if we were to move forward on a plan, we would use that as the launching pad and then go from there to diving into specifically what that partnership could be.
How far are we from the master plan, from finishing the master plan, or is that completed now?
So we've completed phase 1, which was really the visioning and mission update. We're now kicking off phase 2 that we plan to aggressively wrap up by July, August of this year.
Excellent. And then another question I had, would we still be going out to both the school district and the county for participation in this?
Yes, I think arguably we'd reach out because of the regional significance of this area and this development.
Okay. Other questions?
Are you planning on doing this preliminary study, like with the other projects that you just presented on? Or, I mean, how did this one get to be initially studied and not the other ones?
This one bumped up higher on our priority list because of the involvement we've had with the university on their master plan, number one. And number two, because for us as a department, a lot of the things that, and I can let Jonathan speak to this because he's much smarter than I am on it, a lot of the things that the university is looking at doing in terms of targeting the uses and the projects and the developments and the tenants they want to see up at Research Park ties in directly with what our economic development department and business development department are doing in terms of recruiting and building kind of that pipeline of incubator companies that then expand within both the city and the region as a whole. So it really ties into aligning both what the RDA can do with economic development along with housing and transit, and doing it in a way that is a partnership with the majority landowner up there.
Thanks.
So board members, at this time, I'd be looking for a motion either to adopt the resolution that's in your packet or not, but we are looking for action on this today.
And again, there are two separate areas.
So two separate, I mean, I guess you could have one motion adopting both areas.
Strongly about one and not the other.
Right.
Correct. Yep.
All right, I make a motion that we approve the boundaries as set in the document. For both sections.
I'll second that.
All
As
right.
it's just moving forward, the process and looking at it. So there's a lot of more discussion and policy questions that we'll be having.
Yes, there is. So I have a motion by Board Member Dugan, and a second by Board Member Rogers. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Well, we will be seeing a lot more of you, I'm sure, Jonathan, so. Let's go back to the North Temple Catalytic Project. I was. I do.
We could do that now while we wait for Andrew.
Yeah,
Sorry, put out there.
no,
I
that's
don't know,
okay.
It means all these people leave, but.
And then let's vote. All right, well, the board has spoken. So I would need a motion to go into a closed session, please.
I move that we go into closed session.
You have to say that it's highlighted.
Is it highlighted? Oh, man. I'm so sorry. Oh, it's not on mine. Okay. Okay, I move that we close the session to go into strategic sessions to discuss pending or reasonable imminent litigation.
Do I have a second? Second. Okay, I have a motion by Board Member Valdemoros, a second by Board Member Rogers. I am going to roll call this. Anna?
Yes.
James? Yes. I'm a yes. Chris? Yes. Dan?
Yes.
Okay, we are in closed session. If you don't know why we are going into closed session, then that means you probably can't be in the room. So, thank you.
And then we'll aim to be done with this. Andrew's in
going to get started again because we only have a few minutes. We're going to save the elections till the very last. So we're going to go ahead and start with the North Temple Catalytic Project, which is item number 2. Because we don't have a ton of time and we want to be able to talk about these things, I'm just going to give a quick overview. We had a discussion in October about what catalytic means and what sort of projects North Temple could look at to be catalytic. I think a lot of this stemmed from Andrew and James of how do we actually, we need something there to activate the area. And so we asked staff to kind of come out with some strategies for us, and that's where we're at right now. Ben did a great job on the staff report, and if you have more questions or want more information, just talk to anybody sitting at the table there. They have all the info. But because we're kind of in a hurry, I just wanted to throw some of that out there and then turn it on over to RDA. Kara, thanks for being there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just go through the list of the ideas that were proposed last time. And it's been rearranged a little bit from the last memo, but the list that's in the materials in front of you start with strategic property acquisition, where we could acquire properties in the North Temple project area for redevelopment. The next one is strategic property redevelopment, which is the idea here is to use RDA funds to facilitate and incentivize the redevelopment of large and strategic properties in the project area. The third idea is the Folsom Trail enhancement and City Creek daylighting. So this is taking the current design that UTA is working on through the Tiger Grant and enhancing some of that for landscape and lighting above and beyond what the current budget can do for the Folsom Trail. And then also considering City Creek daylighting. The next idea was implementing interim and temporary uses of city-owned property in Folsom Corridor. And I can go into more detail about any of these if you guys want to come back to them. The next idea was establishing a revolving loan fund program to assist buyers of contaminated properties. And that is where buyers might not be able to get traditional financing before there's a sign-off on the site reaching no further action status by the DEQ, and offering some kind of bridge acquisition loan to fill that gap. The next idea was an adaptive reuse loan program similar to what we did in the Granary District, and that would be establishing a separate loan program probably funded by tax increment, where buildings could be brought up to code in the project area using that program. A facade improvement grant program, and I think there's been further discussion about the 2020-2024 consolidated plan and how that might overlap with RDA project areas, so this might not need to use RDA funds after all. And then finally, implementing a public art program. So those were the ideas that we wanted to hear feedback on and make sure that we are going in the right direction while drafting the project area work plan, which is mentioned in the guiding framework that's up on the screen and included in your packets.
So the catalytic, why did the market not make it as a catalytic project on this list?
The market, although not expressly identified, I think is considered a strategic property redevelopment, so the RDA could assist with pre-development activities there or in some other way.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Been any further discussions with the state? The Fair Park Estate property. Have you been involved in any discussions with state partners about the Fair Park study and kind of maybe furthering the idea of having a market there?
Yes, I actually saw the executive director of the Fair Park this morning, and their staff is in the process of developing a business plan and a pro forma for an international market at the Fair Park. and they plan to present that to the Fair Park Board in February.
Madam Chair, I was just wondering, maybe we can call it out a little bit more in regards to Anna's, Board Member Valdemoris's question, is just maybe calling it out, just saying, in conjunction with the investment that we've already made with the Fair Park feasibility study, looking at ways to, implement that with partners in the Fair Park or the state or the county at that level.
Okay.
Madam Chair, thank you again for all this. The policy questions were, I have a question about policy question number 2. The focus area. If we were to look at a focus area, what would change, I guess? What would be helpful in that potential idea to focus on, say, the 2 blocks there between 8th and 10th or 7th and 9th?
Okay, sorry, I was catching up on what policy question number 2 was. Can you tell
It
me?
was a focused area question about whether a geographic focus area should be pursued. Would there be benefit to doing that in this case, above and beyond what we already have, or is it maybe not the best option right now?
I think that came out of the map where we identified where current projects were in the project area and looking at where private investment is already happening and maybe really focusing there to, fill the gaps where it's not happening. But I can, with the list of strategies that we've offered in this memo, they're not all located in that focus area. So I'm not sure.
Okay. I think I would be interested in something akin to that. I think we can have a lot of development. I agree with the ballpark, the white ball field redevelopment question and where that is right now. The market, et cetera, those are great. But the heart of the issue is right around Jackson Track Stop, right? By the 8th West, essentially. And so I'd love to see us focus on that small geographic area as a focal point for our efforts. If we have a limited amount of money or time and staff and all those things, right? If we could, I think, focus a catalytic concept there, probably through strategic property redevelopment or acquisition or some combination with the city housing authority or some other entities. I think that would be a great jumpstart for everything else you've talked about, which could all be helpful, whether it's on Folsom, the Fair Park, anywhere else along that street. I think that would be the starting point for me, and then it would emanate out from there.
And so just to make sure I wrote that down correctly, you're talking about a focus area that's more centered on the intersection of North Temple and 800 West.
Could it be even more specific about an actual address?
We'll stick with the track stop.
Well, we've had a good initial meeting with the new owner of the Gateway Inn Motel. So we started a good relationship, I hope. But I think that is sort of the epicenter of a lot of what we're talking about there. And so I'd love to see as much focus as possible there as it ripples north and south along North Temple. Because these are all great things. I just don't think any of them are going to hit the core of the issue until we can hit that geographic area.
Madam Chair, I think this kind of goes back to our other item in discussing the affordable housing component with the Northwest Quadrant. I think a lot of these can be tackled with that discussion, that policy discussion as it comes forward.
Madam Chair, I have a few comments. So the way I see North Temple, like for a long time we've been talking about North Temple and how we can help it. And I think we've looked at different projects that some of them have been successful and some of them less. Is it closer? Sorry about that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there are some things that happen and that we don't know what happened. So we acquired the overnighter, correct? And we're gonna put housing in there. What's the status of that one?
The status of that project right now is they applied for, but were not successful in getting the 9% tax credits this last fall. So we've been working with Brinshaw as they are looking at potentially a different model for financing that, leaning heavier on maybe applying for 4% tax credits and or changing the development mix a little bit. So in light of just learning that they didn't get the tax credits last month, they're early on in that step right now of kind of re-looking at their pro forma.
Other perform,
Mhm.
okay.
So
Or
they're
moving forward,
moving forward, still under contract. We're working with them and seeing what we can do if we want to try to, if there's something we can do immediately, or if it's, we're going to kind of wait again and see how they do next round.
and then the next thing, so far we've tried with North Temple, we did try at some point facade improvements in the past, which were, I wish it had been more successful. And I think it was because of, it was somewhat of a difficulty on how to get a facade improvement. It was a matching grant, so I don't think the owners couldn't really grasp what we were asking. But we did a few of them, so that's good. We could try it again if it's something that, if we could loosen up all those rules and those strings. Then in tandem, I think it's important that we focus on this linear like street, and then what are the things that are working and have not worked, and the things that we could try gain some momentum in each of us. So to me, it's important that we do look at the at the market, and we do look at the 800 West. And I'm not sure if which one happens first, if they happen at the same time. But we keep looking at it like that, like step by step. And now we're fulfilling the things that we were hoping to fulfill and gain some extra activity in North Temple. I'm not sure if that makes any sense, but I hope it does.
Yeah, I think I don't disagree at all. I think that based on having, how many years left in the area? Right. 8? 9?
No.
11. Yeah, Jill would know. Jill here.
20.
How many years left in North Temple?
2037? Okay.
We got some time.
What's that? Yeah. So yeah, I think my interest was incrementally. It could take a long time because we don't see as many issues going west from the fairgrounds, for instance, right? We have development going way further west, obviously, already, and then our current developments are focused around the west end of, say, White Ball Field and the overnighters down there, that sort of thing. We don't have is something to deal with farther east, which is sort of the epicenter of what we're talking about, the problems that are causing the perception issues, the real issues of crime, those kind of things. So that's where I was saying we prioritize that small section as really our focus as much as possible, and collaborate with other entities who are also interested in putting some money towards it, perhaps, and see if we can get a group concept together and make an impact right there on 8th West.
Mine's just kind of a questionnaire, and that's, I said it's a questionnaire. I would never call you Karen.
I heard that.
Now I almost forgot my question. Do we know of any opportunity zone money that's coming into the North Temple creation area?
You know, there's one developer who has met with us that I think has some residential projects who might be using opportunity zone money, but they came in and talked with us and we're not involved in their deal. So that's the only one I've heard about, though.
Okay. All right.
Do we know how many projects in the North Temple area are contaminated?
I'd say definitely not. But we did have a brownfields grant and did assessments on 8 different sites. Those were the property owners that were interested in taking advantage of that money. And so we have results on those 8 sites. I think what it tells us is that along the rail line, there's probably contamination that we can expect, but we haven't assessed other sites.
Okay, and then my second question is, what about, do we have any update on what's going on with White Ball Park? And it's talking here about how, or the policy question talks about how it's owned by the state DFCM. So what role would we have in that if they were to develop that, since it wouldn't be tax generating?
I would assume it'd be, if the state were to put that out for development, that would be some kind of public-private partnership, and by the fact of the state either selling or more likely leasing the property to a developer, then once they do that, it becomes taxable. And so our role at that point could be to assist whoever the ultimate developer is in redeveloping that property and building it out.
Okay.
And I guess just one thing I'd add to that, an update we do have on that is that Fair Park staff are working on an RFP for White Ballpark, and and Larry Molinax told me that it should be done in about 30 to 40 days. So, sorry.
So I guess, so that I can clear, like, what's your ask of us today with North Temple and with the funding available that you said there was?
That's a good question. The ask today is one, just to lay out what we see as some of the potential opportunities that we as an RDA can play a role in, to see if the board has any that they would like us to prioritize one over the other, as well as inform you that we will be, as you saw in the attachment, we're taking these and consolidating these into a work plan. And then the purpose of those work plans is to inform us as staff of what we ultimately will put before the board as part of our annual budget. And so you will see this come back around to you as part of the next year's budget cycle of where you want to put funding and priorities. But as part of allocating those funds in last year's budget, you asked us to come back and give you ideas of what we may utilize those funds for. And so if there's something specific you would like us to do, we can take that as direction. We can obviously come back and run some feasibility on a few of these options and see what we think we could do in the short term, and then what's our long-term approach in terms of should we be looking at property acquisition or just setting aside loan funds and doing it that way. So,
Anyone else for right now? I just, have a couple of thoughts real quick. I agree with Anna in that it's important to look at like sort of what has worked well and what hasn't. But I also think an incremental change is what we thought it sort of is what we've been waiting for, and it hasn't happened. And that's why, policy question number one is the biggest one for me, and it's something that I keep wanting us to answer, and I don't know that we can. I don't know that we have that answer. But what is catalytic? What does it mean? And this isn't just going to be the question that we have for this project. It's the question that we will have for State Street. It's the question we will have for 9 Line. What is catalytic such that we are creating a project that creates more projects? And not just projects that the RDA has to fund, but projects that make it so people want to come into that area and fund it. I think I would encourage us to, and I'm sure you already have, Kara, I know that you have been working very hard out in this area, but to Andrew's point, our local small businesses over there that actually have survived and thrived in an area that I think sort of you would have expected maybe there not to be as many. What is working for them, and what do they need? What is a catalytic project for them? And to make it so that we continue allowing them to thrive and survive. And, I think in part we do have to, for me, we do have to sort of, and again, I'm kind of looking at this as how will this be a learning experience? I don't want it to be a guinea pig, right? I want it to be successful, but how can we use it as a learning experience for State Street? And we also can't just focus on North Temple, but the neighborhoods that feed and use North Temple. And that's really who we need and want to support. Those are the communities that the reason that we have these areas and the reason that the RDA exists, right, is to support those surrounding communities and ensure that they're not forgotten about. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, as you're developing your sort of work plan, I hope that, and as board members, we keep in mind what is catalytic?
Right.
What does that mean? What does that look like? What does it look like for the neighborhoods? What does it look like for those small businesses? And how do we use the tools that we have to create that catalyst for that community, right? And I think that's the question that we've been struggling with this project area, and sort of been saying, oh, we'll get there, we'll get there, we'll get there. Well, we're here, let's do this, right? And so I would just encourage all of us to be thinking about that, to be, how can, and come to us, and how can we support you in that, right? That's really, I think, what I want to see in this project area, is something that's going to start the fire for the rest of the neighborhood, right? And give them what they actually need. And I think the Fair Park is part of that. And I think it will be a certain grounding tool for part of that. It will create a space, but there's a lot more that we can do, I think. And want to be sure we're working with people that have lived there in the area and have had successful businesses in the area for decades, and really get them what they need and be supportive of that. Those are just my 2 thoughts. Andrew?
I maybe took it for granted, the chart you led off with. We had an updated chart this time. I don't know who updated it. The annual North Temple project area tax increment growth by dollar and percentage. I mean, fundamentally, the RDA is about this, right? So we track success. This is the point of opening project areas. But I think this is a piece of it. I think the piece that Chair Fowler brought up was important as well, and that I'm taking it for granted right now, and I shouldn't. That there is a maintenance of existing businesses and small businesses in particular there. There's also a metric of crime, different types of crime and things, which isn't really RDA specific, but if the feedback we're getting from developers and businesses is there's a perception of unsafety there, we need to take something that's going to address that. It's perception and it's reality. So a metric is some of the crime statistics we're looking at and how do those move. I think there may be a third one or fourth one as well that I'm not sure. I want your feedback on this, but one of the major issues in the city is to support businesses and growth, you need resident people. So housing's a piece of this as well. I don't know how much. That's where I'd look to you to sort of help understand, is there a metric or percentage we're looking for in mixed use in this particular area on a TSA zone, for instance, that could yield the sort of growth here in the tax increment growth that we're looking for, or percentage. Those are the things that are in my head right now, and it could be some mixture of those. Right. That's it. And building off what you said earlier, I think maybe more specifically, I should have said this earlier, so thank you, Chair. Those are the things I'd be looking for. And I know some of this is obvious. You know this already. But I think those are the metrics that I would be looking for to say, are we making a dent in this? Or at least a start that can grow off of long term.
You have something? Thanks, Andrew. So we have to wrap up, but I would ask, Kara, I know you do, and the team does some community outreach and stuff like that. If it's okay with you guys, I would love if you met with community members or small business owners to maybe be invited to that meeting, so I can just be a fly on the wall and listen. Again, I think this will help us inform sort of what we need to be looking for as we do other projects where we know we need that catalytic start. So if those come up in the future, I would love to be invited. That's okay.
Yeah, that's great. There's a monthly River District Chamber meeting that we attend, so I'll make sure to pass that information along.
Great, thank you so much.
One more thing, sorry, is that okay? One more thing. I think we thought the catalytic project was going to be the overnighter in a way. So I guess we have long-term catalytic ones that are big deals. Like we acquired that property, and because we want people, because I think that's what the businesses need, to have people around them so that they can buy in their stores. And also we can look at what was a planning thing, the faster, easier, cheaper, or
Lighter, quicker, cheaper.
that one. Those kind of that are not as expensive projects that could actually be catalytic as well. So maybe that's how we think about North Temple, or at least how I can kind of wrap my head around it, especially with a limited resources that we have. So big ones, small ones that we can do faster.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for all your work on this, and I'm sure we will be talking more about it. And we've saved the best for last, I think. We are at a new year, and that means, fortunately and unfortunately, we have to. I say unfortunately because I'm going to miss you. Fortunately because. So we have. He's our chairperson now. We have to. It is time to have elections for a new vice chair of the RDA. Unfortunately for all of you, you are stuck with me for another year. So welcome aboard. I just want to say to Chris that you have been an amazing vice chair, and I have been very lucky to have you as my sounding board and to have you there making your amazingly witty jokes when I want to kill people. So thank you for that and calming me down in those times. And I am glad you're our new chairperson.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
And I probably should have given you your cool jacket today, but
Oh, that's okay. I did receive a cool jacket pullover thing and that says SLC RDA, and so it's at
he
home.
burned it.
It's at home, of course. Yeah, so thank you very much, and it was an honor to serve, and yeah, it was a great experience, and it was great serving with you as well. We have a really good good cop, bad cop routine, so. Who do you think? Okay, so yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, with that, you all have your ballots in front of you. Anybody nominate a vice chair, or if somebody is interested, or?
Madam Chair, I would like to nominate Ana Valdemoros as vice chair.
We'll take that.
I don't know, is there any discussion on any of this? All right. Well,
Pass the ballots to me and we'll read them off.
Does anyone else want to be the vice chair, or is it just Anna?
all right, your ballots are in front of you, and then pass them over.
Nominate the vacancy.
Whoever takes over for this.
Harsh.
Everybody? You got everybody?
Really?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm
Well, can I look
Wow.
Having a real.
Okay.
Oh, man.
I'm just going to read them from here, if that's okay, so you can be my witness. Board Member Wharton votes for Ana Valdemoros. Board Member Dugan votes for Ana Valdemoros. Board Member Fowler votes for Ana Valdemoros. Board Member Johnston votes for Ana. Board Member Rogers votes for Ana. And Board Member Valdemoros votes for Ana. So.
Hey, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Now the best part. Are we switching seats or no?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. Thank
We
you.
don't have to.
So
People
everyone
don't
gets,
want.
people can stay and see.
Okay, real quick. We don't have to, listen,
Chris would switch.
we don't have to play musical chairs if we don't want to play musical chairs, and just, James has already pulled a number. Done and done. Y'all are playing
Pick
musical
your
chairs.
number. And then the person with the lowest number would pick their next seat first, other than Chris's seat, because that is occupied by Ana. Okay, just one.
Pass it. Boys.
Chris and Dan. Here we go.
Thank you. What'd you get? You're gonna like this seat. I've spent a lot of time here over the last 2 years.
Yes,
It's
you
a great angle.
Well, of course, I got number one.
I've been a man of many vices, so get it. Nice.
All right,
Okay, so who has number one?
Jamesy.
Of course, I do.
Ah,
So where are you sitting?
That is a great question.
I know.
where Ben is.
You know what? I gotta break it up a bit. I'm gonna go over where board member Dugan's at.
Oh, okay.
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 All right, number 2. Where are you gonna sit, Mr. Dugan?
Yeah.
Switchies?
Yeah.
Okay. 3. Where are you sitting, Andrew? Chris?
Number 4, I'll just switch with Anna.
Okay. Great. Now you all know
Okay.
where your assigned seats are.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
So maybe give us like 2 minutes to switch to council, or do you guys want to take a break? Oh, sorry, there's announcements. Sorry, I'm skipping over Danny.
And we have a consent agenda
Thank you.
after.
Jeez, glad someone's keeping us on track.
Totally forgot. about
Announce things, Danny.
Okay, real quickly, we have hired Lauren Parisi out of the Planning Division. She started with us 2 weeks ago. She survived her first.
Are you and Nick just fighting?
meetings.
Is this like a family
Well, it's not
feud
fighting.
going on, or what?
I worry every time I turn my car on. I'll just say that. It also doesn't help that my next update is that thanks to the city council appointing Katie as the city attorney, we lost our RDA attorney. However, we have the pleasure of having Allison Parks and Kimberly staying with us for our RDA attorneys, but Allison also helped with the planning department. So,
Wow.
yeah, just going to leave it
Wow.
at that.
Danny, I'm gonna say, I really like Nick in planning, so please don't make it so he quits.
Yeah, no, we will be sending a nice fruit basket to Nick
Good,
Norris. Other updates, our West Montrose property on 765 South and 300 West is out via an RFP. This is our last property offering in the West Temple Gateway project area. That is online if anyone has any interest in reading that, but those submissions are due on March 31st, and we'll keep you posted on what we receive on that. We also selected GSBS Architects for our Japantown Design Strategy Project. We have had our first stakeholder meeting with them as staff. They were selected because of their approach to community engagement process, their design strategy, as well as their thoughts on including a maintenance and installation menu for improvements to the Japantown area. So they are getting started. They hope to be done by September of this year. And they will be having their first working group meeting later this month. If you're interested in going, Thursday, January 23rd, we can get you the details on that if you want to participate in that. And then finally, each of you should have received our RDA 101 binder. We had staff working very hard on this, compiling all the information to get you everything together in one book that you may or may not ever want or need or care to know about the RDA. So this is something we hope to continue to update as obviously staff and positions change, but also as policies and plans get added to it. So
Can I just say that is an amazing book, and I can't imagine all of the work that went into putting that together, so thank you to your staff. And maybe we should implement a policy that when a developer comes and asks us for money, we give them that book and they can't come back until they've read it.
Do a book report.
Yeah, they have to do a book report. When you understand our role, then we'll talk.
that's a great idea. So that is all of our updates, unless there are questions.
You don't think so? And then it looks like we have, thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
It looks like we have a consent item, so I would just need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion. Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Council Member Rogers, a second by Council, or Board Member, what?
Janderton.
Oh, it wasn't you? Oh, I'm sorry. Stop it, all of you. Gosh, I have a motion by Board Member Johnston and a second by Board Member Wharton. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. That is for the budget amendment, so it's calendared. With that, we're done with RDA for today. And Mr. Chair, when would you like to return back?
Do people feel like we need another break, or can we just get right to it?
I have to leave, but.
Oh.
What did I say wrong? I thought, I said because of their impressive response to the items the agency